It is just past 11 at night, and the lights of the ferry go out. Not flicker. Out. The boat is tilting in a way boats are not supposed to tilt. You cannot see the life jackets in the dark, and nobody on the crew speaks enough English to tell you what is happening next. That is not a worst-case story. That is the Bali Strait in July of 2025. The ferry sank. At least 5 people died. More than 30 went missing. Here is the part nobody tells you before you book. There are 2 free apps that would have told you not to get on that boat. One Indonesian phrase that gets you a straight answer at the ticket window, and a single rule about the 5 p.m. cutoff that locals quietly follow and tourists quietly ignore. Most travelers think Indonesian ferry safety is about the boat. Is it old? Is it crowded? Is the engine making a funny noise? That is the wrong question, because you cannot inspect a ferry from the dock, and you are not a maritime engineer. The real question is the conditions you are choosing to put any boat into. A perfectly fine ferry in calm daylight is a different machine than the same ferry in a 4-meter swell at midnight with the lights cut. You are not picking a vessel. You are picking a window of time. Here is the system you are inside, whether you know it or not. Indonesian ferries on the busy routes. Ketapang to Gilimanuk across the Bali Strait. The Sanur runs to Nusa Penida, sail more or less around the clock. The schedule looks reassuring on a website, but the boats that leave after dark are operating with thinner crews, less oversight at the ports, and almost no margin if something goes wrong. If the engine cuts and the lights go out at 11:20 at night in open water, which is exactly what happened to the Tunu Pratama Jaya in July of 2025, there is no Coast Guard helicopter 10 minutes away. There is the dark and the swell and whoever is on the boat with you. Now, the locals know this. Watch who is actually on the late crossings, and you will notice it skews heavily toward freight, shift workers, and tourists. The people with a choice tend to cross in daylight. That is not superstition. That is a queue with rules nobody wrote down. 6 moves. Do them in this order. Step 1. Before you book anything, open 2 free apps on your phone, BMKG and Windy. BMKG is the Indonesian government weather agency. Windy is a global wave and wind forecast. You want both because they sometimes disagree, and when they disagree, you take the more cautious one. You are looking for 2 things: wave height on your route and any storm warnings in the next 24 hours. If Windy is showing swell above about 2 meters on a Bali Strait crossing, that is your answer. You are not getting on that boat. Skip this step, and you are gambling with information you could have had for free in 90 seconds. Step 2. Book your ticket the day before, not the day of. The traders at Gilimanuk will tell you to book at least 5 hours ahead and arrive 2 hours early. In practice, day before booking removes the late afternoon scramble entirely. The ticket windows wind down their service as the light goes. Show up at 4:30 in the afternoon hoping to grab something for the 6 o'clock, and you are walking into thin staffing, sold-out daytime sailings, and a quiet push toward the night crossing, which is exactly the boat you do not want. Step 3. This is the rule. Do not board any ferry whose scheduled departure is after 5 p.m. 5 p.m. is not arbitrary. It is roughly the line where, if anything goes wrong on a normal Indonesia day, the rest of the journey happens in the dark. Locals with options follow this. Tourists ignore it because the website said the boat sails at 8 and the website looked official. The website is not the one in the water at midnight. Step 4. At the ticket window, ask one question in Indonesian. Penyeberangan ditunda, pronounced Penyeberangan ditunda. It means, is the crossing postponed? This is the phrase that gets you a straight answer instead of a polite shrug. If the answer is yes, or if you hear cuaca buruk, meaning bad weather, you are done. You do not negotiate. You find a hotel in Banyuwangi or Gilimanuk and you cross in the morning. A night in a guest house costs around 200,000 Indonesian rupiahs. That is roughly $13 US. It is the cheapest insurance policy you will ever buy. Step 5. If you are crossing in daylight as planned, the moment you board, find the life jackets with your eyes. Not later, now. The Indonesian phrase for safety equipment is alat keselamatan. Alat keselamatan. If you cannot see life jackets from where you are sitting, move to where you can. This takes 30 seconds, and it is the difference between knowing where the gear is and feeling around for it in the dark on a tilting deck. Step 6. Have your backup route picked before you leave the hotel. For Bali to Java, that is the flight from Denpasar to Surabaya, about an hour in the air, usually somewhere between 500,000 and 1.5 million rupiahs, depending on how late you book. For the Nusa Penida runs, the backup is simply waiting until the next morning's fast boat. Knowing your alternative before you need it means you make the cancellation decision calmly, not under pressure at a ticket window with the light fading. That is the full sequence. 2 apps, day before booking, the 5 p.m. cutoff, the 1 phrase, the life jacket scan, the backup route. Do those 6 things and the worst version of this trip stops being available to you. She lands in Banyuwangi at 3 in the afternoon, planning to cross to Gilimanuk that evening. In the taxi to Ketapang Port, she opens Windy. 2.3 meters of swell forecast for 9 p.m., dropping to 1.1 by sunrise. She closes the app. She already knows. At the ticket window, the clerk gestures at a 6:30 sailing. She asks, "Penye berangan ditunda?" The clerk pauses, then says, "Cuaca buruk." She does not argue. She does not try to push for a different boat. She buys a ticket for the 6 a.m. crossing the next morning and walks back into town to find a room. The polite no in both directions. She gave it, and she received it. The next morning at 5:30, she boards in flat light, finds the Alat Keselamatan from her seat before the boat pulls away, and is in Gilimanuk before breakfast. The whole detour cost her 1 night in a guest house and a slightly later start. The traveler who took the 6:30 sailing the night before, and there were several, had a fine crossing. They almost always do. That is the part that makes this hard. The dice usually come up in your favor. The point of the moves is what happens the night they don't. One thing worth knowing that I did not put in the steps: the BMKG app gives you marine warnings in Indonesian by default, and the translation inside the app is patchy. The word to scan for is gelombang tinggi, high waves. If you see it on your route, that is the same signal as a 2-meter reading on Windy. 2 sources, 1 answer. 4 phrases. Each one does a specific job at the port. Penye berangan ditunda, crossing postponed. This is the 1 phrase from step 4. Use it at the ticket window and you will get a real answer. Cuaca buruk, bad weather. This is what you will hear back if the answer is yes. When you hear it, the decision is already made for you. Alat keselamatan, safety equipment. The thing you locate with your eyes the moment you sit down on the boat. Dewasa pagi saja, only in the morning. This is the phrase you use with a driver, a hotel desk, or a tour operator who is trying to put you on an evening crossing. It closes the conversation politely and clearly. Here is the version you screenshot. Check BMKG and Windy before booking. Book the day before, not the day of. No ferry scheduled after 5 p.m. At the window, ask, "Penye berangan ditunda?" On board, locate life jackets immediately. Know your flight or next morning backup. That is the whole video on 1 screen. You now know how to walk into an Indonesian ferry port. Read the conditions in 90 seconds on your phone. Ask the 1 question that gets you a real answer and walk away from the boat that should not be sailing. Without panic, without drama, and without missing your trip. Indonesia is generous to travelers who pay attention to what the locals are quietly already doing, and unforgiving to the ones who don't. The phrase that does the heavy lifting at that ticket window is in Indonesian, and you noticed how much easier the whole sequence is when you have even a few words. I made a video on the best ways to pick up enough Bahasa Indonesia to handle moments like this, including the lazy way most travelers have never tried. There is a card popping up on the right of the screen now. Tap that and it is right there.